Joshua Barnes, anchor and correspondent for NewsX World. Joshua, what updates have you got for us?
Yes, Thomas, we are getting more reactions coming in from global leaders now. A massive voice that we have heard from is Giorgia Meloni, the Italian Prime Minister. She says, "This news saddens us deeply. I had the privilege of enjoying his friendship." She also continues to say he asked the world once again for the courage to change direction, to follow a path that does not destroy but cultivates, repairs and protects. His teaching and his legacy will not be lost. We greet the Holy Father with hearts full of sadness, but we know that he is now in the peace of the Lord. Of course, the Vatican placed within Italy Meloni's relationship, as she said there, with Pope Francis. She referred to it as a friendship. Now, Pope Francis has of course met with several world leaders. We gave you updates earlier from Emmanuel Macron, Friedrich Merz, JD Vance, who met with Pope Francis on Sunday. He of course was there in Italy, has now arrived in India. To give you an update on what JD Vance has said, he said, "My heart goes out to the millions of Christians all over the world who loved him." Vance, of course, arrived in Rome on Friday and was there for the Sunday service at the Vatican, also meeting Pope Francis in a private meeting. We've had other world leaders as well. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi describing his deep pain at the passing of Pope Francis. European Commission leader President Ursula von der Leyen saying that Pope Francis inspired millions far beyond just the Catholic Church. This is a sentiment that has been repeated by several world leaders, that Pope Francis was not just a figure for Catholics, around 1 billion Catholics and Christians in the world, but also to non-Catholics. Of course, Pope Francis focusing on humanity, focusing on LGBTQ rights, also looking at problems within the church as well. His progressive movements within the church weren't met with hitback and backlash. They were pushed forward, and Francis was a popular figure within the church, also a popular figure with world leaders. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk describing Pope Francis as a good, warm and sensitive man. Egypt's President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi saying Pope Francis was a voice of peace, love and compassion. We've also heard from King Charles III, monarch of Britain, of course, describing his meeting with Pope Francis in 2009 at the Vatican, also celebrating Pope Francis. This is a rhetoric that world leaders, monarchs, politicians have been repeating. Just to bring you back to what we know about Pope Francis's passing, we know at around 7:35 this morning, according to that Vatican statement from Kevin Fannell, he said from the Vatican that Pope Francis died at 7:35. Of course, some context on this: Pope Francis spent 38 days in hospital, initially admitted to hospital in February with bronchitis. His situation worsened. He was then being treated sometimes in an ICU for pneumonia. His condition worsened, though he did also recover in some points, to the point where he was able to leave the Gemelli Hospital in Rome, where he was stationed, returning to the Vatican and of course taking part in that Sunday service. Pope Francis, Pope for 12 years after becoming Pope Francis in 2013, the first Southern Hemisphere native to become Pope, the first person outside of Europe to be Pope in 1300 years. The significance of his tenure has been felt by billions across the world, and billions across the world are also mourning his passing.
Joshua, thank you very much. If you're just joining us, we are covering the death of Pope Francis, who has died at 88 years old, after a statement from the Vatican. The visuals we are showing you now is of St. Peter's Square, at the centre of the Vatican in Rome. The Pope, who was the first Latin American leader of the Roman Catholic Church, died this morning at 7:35 a.m. local time on Easter Monday. This comes just a day after he made a public appearance on Easter Sunday with J.D. Vance, who has just posted a tribute to the late Pope. And we have some news coming in now. A visitor to the Vatican reacts to the death of Pope Francis, which was announced earlier today in a statement by the Vatican a day after he made an appearance before the crowds in St. Peter's Square. Let's take a listen in.
I just read it. One of my friends texted me, and she texted me, "Do you know that the Pope just died?" And I said, "Really?" And then I sort of checked it, and I was sort of really shocked, because I was here yesterday at Mass, and I saw the Pope, and he looked just so fragile, you know. And I'm really shocked, and there's a sort of inquiet buzz now around here.
If you're just joining us, Pope Francis has died at the age of 88. The Vatican has announced the pontiff, who was Bishop of Rome and head of the Catholic Church, became Pope in 2013 after his predecessor, Benedict XVI, resigned. His death was announced by Cardinal Farrell in a statement released by the Vatican. He said, "Dearest brothers and sisters, with deep sorrow I must announce the death of our Holy Father Francis." As we said, the Pope died at 7:30 a.m. local time, with world leaders paying tribute, flooding in to his contagious smile and boundless compassion, which is what French President Emmanuel Macron called him, along with a man of humility. His day comes a day after he appeared in St. Peter's Square to wish Happy Easter to thousands of worshippers. Francis's death sets in motion the centuries-old process of electing a new pope. We will now go into more details in terms of the issues that Francis was facing. In the final months of his life, the Pope's ill health saw him spend several weeks in hospital. On the 14th of February 2025, the 88-year-old was taken to the Gemelli Hospital in Rome to be treated for pneumonia in both lungs. He had experienced difficulties breathing for several days. He was discharged on the 23rd of March and made two public appearances since his dismissal from hospital, one being when he was initially released and the other being his appearance yesterday on Easter Day, one day less than 24 hours before his passing. The pontiff was particularly susceptible to pneumonia, which is an infection of the lungs that can be caused by bacteria or fungus or viruses, after undergoing a partial lung removal as a young man. Yesterday, which was when he made his last public appearance, he was joined by J.D. Vance yesterday. Who adds on Twitter, now X, "My heart goes out to the millions of Christians all over the world who loved him," he said online. We are now joined by Joshua Barnes, anchor and correspondent, once again to give us some more updates. Joshua, what have you got for us?
Yes, Thomas. So while we take a step away from these reactions from world leaders, which we have been bringing you for the past hour or so, I wanted to take a look back at Pope Francis's life. Of course, the first Southern Hemisphere male to become the Pope, also the first non-European to become Pope in 1300 years. Pope Francis, born Jorge Mario Bergoglio in Buenos Aires on the 17th of December 1936. He is the eldest of 5 children. His parents had fled Italy to escape fascism, finding themselves in Argentina. Now, in his early life, he's described as enjoying tango dancing also becoming a supporter of San Lorenzo, his local football team. He was lucky to survive an earlier bout of pneumonia, suffering and having a part of his lung removed. Then as an elderly man, he also suffered with pain in his right knee, which was one of the many health issues that he faced. Of course, we know that he spent a serious period of time towards the end of his life in the Gemelli Hospital in Rome, but Pope Francis also faced difficulties throughout his life with other health conditions. A bit more context on his earlier life. Pope Francis, as known as a young Bergoglio back then, worked as a nightclub bouncer and a floor sweeper before graduating as a chemist. He also worked at a local factory where he worked closely to someone called Esther Balestrino, who campaigned against Argentina's dictatorship. He did, of course, devote his later life to the church. He became the Archbishop of Buenos Aires, then becoming the Pope later on in 2013. His life being celebrated across the world. Of course, condolences, prayers, thoughts, but celebration as well. I want to bring you another reaction that we've had from Spain's Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez, who has called Pope Francis's commitment most vulnerable. He says, "I mourn the passing of Pope Francis. His commitment to peace, social justice, and the most vulnerable leaves a profound legacy. Rest in peace." I want to bring us back as well. Actually, I've got some breaking news coming in here. We've heard now that the Eiffel Tower is going to go dark on Monday night to honour Pope Francis's death. That's some latest information that we're getting in. We're also hearing from other world leaders, of course, Giorgia Meloni, who's described herself as having a friendship with Pope Francis. I'll repeat what she has said. He asked the world once again for the courage to change direction, to follow a path that does not destroy, but cultivates, repairs, and protects. His teaching and his legacy will not be lost. We greet the Holy Father with hearts full of sadness, but we know he is now in the peace of the Lord. This message continuing from world leaders. It's not just the Catholics, the Christians, around 1 billion of them across the world. World leaders from countries who celebrate all religions, Christianity, Judaism, Islam, all talking about the work that Pope Francis has done. We look at the key areas. He's looked at humanity, ongoing humanitarian crises reported across the world. Pope Francis has been outspoken on those, whether these have come from wars, civil wars, or natural disasters. Pope Francis has spoken about humanity, and it's one of the key points that he has come across. Of course, he's actually broached war and spoken about immigration as well, challenging global superpowers, challenging the Donald Trump administration. But we do expect a comment from Donald Trump soon. We have had a comment from J.D. Vance, of course, Vice President of the United States, who's currently in India, but yesterday was in Italy. He was there to, of course, celebrate the Easter Sunday service in the Vatican, but also briefly met with Pope Francis. Vance has described Pope Francis' situation as the fact that he was clearly ill, but has also celebrated his life as well.
Joshua, thank you very much for that. We will continue to bring you